Welcome back to Miguel's Cover Show with me, Miguel's Cover. Like every year this time, we're here to take a bite into the most recently concluded Kamen Rider series. Last year's series wasn't a great time for me. But that's not the case with Kamen Rider Gavv. Kamen Rider Gavv follows the story of Shoma, half human, half granite, a type of monster with a mouth on his chest known as a Gavv. For his entire life, he and his mom lived in Stomach Inc. HQ, his father's base of operations, hiding them from the rest of the granite world. But one day, Shoma's siblings kill both his parents, causing them to run off into the human world. In the human world, Shoma learns that due to the modifications made to his Gavv as a child, he can summon little life forms known as Gochizos after eating snacks. Shoma using them to become Kamen Rider Gavv's siblings, continuous schemes to smuggle humans and turn them to these weird jello things known as dark treats, or drugs essentially. Shoma's joined on this quest by journalists Karakita Hanto, Kamen Rider Valen, and Granute, Lakior Marga, or Kamen Rider Ram, all three of them being victims of Stomach Inc.'s machinations. Kamen Rider Gavv is a real return to basics in terms of Kamen Rider's core concepts. The original Kamen Rider story of a man turned into a monster is defined by the story of somebody who is as much of a monster as they are a man. Shoma's journey being heavily defined by the belief that he shouldn't even exist. Shoma's mom being kidnapped as a college student by the leader of a drug cartel, and then Shoma being born, never having a positive spin added to it to distract from how inherently messed up that is. This theme of trying to find value in yourself despite the trauma in your life is something that almost every character, hero, villain deals with throughout the series. Our main three riders and their friend Chachika fighting this trauma through friendship, helping people out, and just learning how to let go, while our villains lead themselves to their deaths to their inability to learn these lessons. But let's stop talking about the plate and eat it by talking about the characters of Gavv. Starting off with Shoma, our main character, whom I already kind of established. Shoma's whole mistake complex is best illustrated by the fact that he's the first Kamen Rider in years to keep their identity this close to the chest. In the past 5 shows, pretty much every member of the main cast would know the main rider's identity, but not with Shoma. Like the minute Valen shows up, the first thing Shoma's happy about is the fact that he's fine with not knowing who he really is. Because for Shoma, being Gavv is just another reminder of how weird he is. Regular people being as scared of him as they are the monsters actually trying to kill them. And if that's the case, maybe it's better that nobody knows who he is. Even when Shoma is forced to reveal who he is to Hanto, he still holds back the fact that he's a granute. Because even with a fellow Kamen Rider, the one person who would be bound to understand him, he still fears what would happen if he were to be completely honest about what he is. But eventually, everyone does figure out that Shoma's a granute, and they still accept him. The thing he thought that would be the great divide between him and integrating into humanity is instead just a quirk to the people who really care about him. Because despite how he felt all his life, the problem has never been him, but the world and people around him. Like in real life, Shoma never chose to be born, and especially never chose how people around him would treat him because of how he was born. If his mother could accept him despite how she was forced to have him, and these random kids he had never met before could accept him, how is he unworthy of love? How does he have no right to exist? All things that make Shoma one of the best main riders in the franchise. The mix of the typical nice guy main rider archetype and a genuine story of a person learning his own self-worth, while it has been done before, I think it's done best with Shoma. His tragedy makes every moment where he's able to save somebody way more impactful than usual. It's another breakthrough in him realizing how much value he really has as a person. It's made even better when the show has Shoma confront the fact that his self-worth is entirely made from protecting others, when he almost decides to give up living in the human world in order to stop the Granutes from taking over. Something all his friends chastise him for, because what value is there in this fight? And the conclusion to all this has to involve giving up what would make him really happy, which is living in the human world with his friends. Even how they implement the snack stuff with Shoma is great. My favorite example is with King's debut. The creatures that Gavv used to transform as the Gochizos usually disappear after each individual use, Shoma essentially digesting them for all their worth. But there is one Gochizo in Shoma's arsenal that never disappears, that being King. The reason it never disappears is that the cake it was created from was created by Shoma and Sachika together. It being the representation of his connection with the first person who accepted him, who wasn't his mother, showing that deeper than even family, love can just be found in the community of people who care about each other. A theme that's not only important in the Shoma's bond with the other 2 riders, but also the debut fight of King, where it's the first for to kill one of his siblings, the people who made him believe he was so worthless in the first place. Like Shoma, Hanto's family is also killed by the Granutes, but in a much more messed up way, because unlike Shoma, whose parents, more specifically his mom, got murdered when he was an adult, Hanto's mom got murdered when he was a child, leaving him with no one. Causing him to become a delinquent until he met this journalist guy. He took him in as an apprentice, Hanto using it as an attempt to try and find who really killed his mother. In this goal, he eventually runs into Gavv, and more importantly to him, this weird guy named Kenzo Suga, who tells him that he can give him a power similar to Gavv, an offer that his mentor tells him to immediately avoid, because obviously the Suga guy seems weird, but suddenly his mentor is killed by a Granute, leaving Hanto all alone again. The perfect situation to make him take up Suga's offer and become Kamen Rider Valen and get revenge against all Granutes, something which becomes a conflict of interest once he starts getting closer to Shoma, the 2 of them becoming the best of friends. Hanto can tell he's hiding something, eventually learning that Shoma's a Granute, which he does not take well. Because how could he possibly be friends with a Granute after how much they've taken away from him? But the show does something which I think is a really interesting way of tackling this, where Hanto almost immediately realizes that he shouldn't hate Shoma, but still feels uncomfortable being around him. Hanto recognizes that Shoma wasn't hiding being a Granute from him due to any malice, but due to an obvious insecurity that his bigotry against them only heightened. But at the same time, he can't just throw away how he feels about the Granutes, and starts just keeping his distance from Shoma, feeling way too weird to ever have a proper conversation with him. Something that allows Suga's plan to move further in motion. Cause I didn't mention this before, but to become a Kamen Rider, Hanto had a Granute organ put inside of him, which would mix with a new dark chocolate Gachito's Suga whipped up in the lab while Hanto's in his long distance relationship arc with Shoma, causes Hanto to have some health complications, which is when Suga reveals his real plan, which is the fact that he indirectly got Hanto's mentor murdered, that Hanto will become one of his two set subjects, and his plan to create the ultimate life form. A truth that leaves Hanto just so mad at himself for how stupid he's been. Instead of sticking with Shoma or listening to his mentor's advice, the minute things got weird for him, he allowed Suga to willingly manipulate him. And now that he's suffering for it, he has no way to excuse it. But Shoma comes in to save the day, making Hanto know that regardless of how alone he thinks he is, or even should be at this point, he'll always have his back. Type of reassurance that allows Hanto to finally grow and evolve. The show does this really cool bit of symbolism where his final form, Frappe, is based on the first treat Shoma and Hanto shared together as friends. A big moment for Hanto, because throughout the show, he always says that he hated sweets, a representation of the kind of tough guy exterior he tries to display. But like Gochizo made from the Frappe, he has another layer, a goofy stubborn guy who can learn to admit that he's wrong. Something which comes to a head quite nicely. Related into the series, Hanto comes face to face with the guy who killed his mom. Despite finally getting the chance to get his ultimate revenge, Hanto decides to let him go. Him growing enough to see how, even if he can't forgive him, there's no value in killing him, a random grunt, in the grand scheme of things. Point emphasized even more of the fact that the Granute is a mentor to some random kid who probably end up just like Hanto if he took his revenge. The cycle of hatred ending because Hanto finally decides to just stop fighting. But to move on from Hanto, we have my favorite character, Lakia. Like the other two, a member of his family died. Unlike the other two though, Lakia is a Granute, and his brother Komel is a failed member of Stomach Inc., who got killed the minute he tried to leave. To avenge his brother, Lakia goes under the alias of Lage 9 and becomes a top member of Stomach Inc. in order to take him down from the inside and find the person who killed his brother. However, once he met Shoma and the two of them have a heart-to-heart, he realizes, like in real life, how many people he screwed over to even sort of attempt his goal. Seeing how humans aren't that different from Granutes, and thus how inherently weird it is to kidnap them en masse. Lakia using his powers as Kamen Rider Ram to try to make up for how he hurt people and to avenge his brother in a more noble way. A journey that leads him to develop connections with so many people. Our other main characters are obviously Dente, Shoma's great uncle and the creator of Dark Treats, who just like Komel and Lakia is trying to redeem himself from the actions he committed under Stomach Inc. But just like his brother, Dente gets murdered once he's found to have defected by none other than Shoma's older sister, Guada. Lakia being mad at himself that under his watch, another person was taken away by the pink scythe. But like with Hanto, Shoma comes in to end the pity party by making Lakia realize even if he can't save his brother or Dente, he won't fail them if he instead sets his sight on saving the world. Instead of defeating Guada out of pure revenge, he's defeated to protect humanity. The man who didn't care about humans becoming one of its greatest protectors. Also like the others, he has a connection to eating snacks as well. So this final form, a la mode is created through eating the last meal meant for Dente, that was instead shared between the four main characters in respect of Dente's memory. This isn't why he's my favorite character though. He's my favorite character because of his funny, deadpan personality and just how much aura he has. This dude gets his second form and starts killing enemies by sliding down stairs with them. One of one rider.
Kamen Rider Gavv.
Sadly though, the latter part of Lakia's final form arc kind of opens Gavv's greatest flaw, that being the villains how Granute society is treated because of how they're written. Something I didn't mention during the story recap is the Granutes, who are a part of Stomach Inc., don't just kidnap people to make dark treats, but eventually eat the dark treats, every of them being equal parts supplier and addict for the stuff. This idea of monsters that are a group of manipulated drug addicts is something the show handles sloppily to say the least, because even though by the end of the series our heroes see how they're victims of Stomach Inc.'s plans, it doesn't wipe away how many of them they kill without regret. Sure, you could argue they're basically human traffickers who know what they're doing, which is definitely how the show justifies writing it this way to a degree. But at the same time, having most of the drug addicts in your series portrayed as heartless criminals like this is not a good look, no matter how you slice it. Especially when some of the only reputation of Granutes who change includes 3 dead people. Yeah, the guy that Hanto forgave just gets murdered by Glada at the end of the episode to never be mentioned again. It really sucks. And Lakia, who as much as I love him in the storyline, the show even having him really bask in the guilt of what he did while working for Stomach Inc., it's weird how they made sure to put him on this pedestal from the other workers by making him be above eating dark treats and thus not a drug addict like the rest of them. It gets even worse when we go to the guys who actually run Stomach Inc., and you see they're not great characters either. The whole angle of them being Shoma's evil siblings is cool, but it takes a long time for any of them to be interesting on how they look, and one of them doesn't even go beyond that with them dying in episode 14. The only two of them that really did anything for me are Nilov and Glada. Glada for how she contributes to Lakia's storyline, her plot of killing Dente, feeling betrayed that he would pick Shoma, the person who in her eyes is tearing her family apart over any of the other stomach kids. It's really sad to see play out, because you can tell how much he cared about Dente, and how if he just didn't mention Shoma, he probably could have saved her and stopped himself from getting killed. Nilev, on the other hand, doesn't reach the same heights character-wise, but gets points for just doing more throughout the series. His mad scientist personality making how little we learn about him till the very end a lot more bearable than it is with the others. Too bad the other two kind of just suck in my opinion. Longo's storyline being the one who hates Shoma the most for being mixed race was interesting during the final form arc. Too bad they gave him a fake out death just for him to coast around till the end of the show, because they have no one cooler to make the final boss. Jeeb's storyline wanting to avenge his sister Sheeta, who I mentioned got murdered earlier, could be cool, but the show really just plays up how weak he is, so it never really gets to go anywhere until the very last episode where they make him avenge his sister by finally able to protect someone he cared about with his life, like she did for him in her final moments. Which kind of hits, but doesn't, because the relationship he has with the person he saved, Lizelle, is way too weak either way you look at it to make it impactful, at least for me. Not to even mention, Lizelle and her dad, the Grand New President Boca, are probably the worst addition to the show overall. They're good from a Fiend's perspective of showing how even Stomach Inc. is a cog in the system at the end of the day. But they're both so whatever that there's nothing to appreciate about them beyond that, which when paired with the show's issues of pairing the Grand New victims of Stomach Inc. just makes this side of the story even worse. Shout out Suga though, for not only being a good catalyst for Hanto's development, for being an interesting character himself, being a real dark reflection of our heroes, as he also lost someone he cared about, his infant child. Instead of using the motivation to try and help others like our three main riders, he says obsessed over it, him getting into the great science, and becoming Kamen Riders so he can eventually create a child that wouldn't die like his original son did. Something the show doesn't really harp on, and unlike in other cases where that would take away from his character, it also gives you something to think about, especially with his relationship with Hanto, where the minute his mentor dies, Suga kind of tries to take that role in Hanto's life, in his own weird way of course, but the parallels are still clear. Too bad Suga's plotline is connected to Bitter Gavv, probably the weirdest handled aspect of the show, whose bright idea was to make the Dark Rider this year 3 differently equally lame guys. I just don't get it. It actually sucks because all the suits are cool, but at the end of the day, I actually like Gavv. Sure, it's flawed, as you can tell from my last ramble, but when it gets right, like its main cast, it gets really right in my opinion. Making it the 3rd best Reiwa Kamen Rider show, even though that bar might be a little low, depending on how you look at it. Hope we can get back-to-back bangers as we dive into the dreams with Kamen Rider Z. Until then, see you in another review. Miguel Silva, signing out.